Making radio great again. Sam Mirejovsky here on the What's Right Media Network. Friends, welcome to the program. Sam at what'srightshow.com is my email. Reach out to me there. I do check my email all the time and will respond. I try to respond to each and every one of you directly. So just send me an email and I'll respond on air or in person. Now, let's get to the top five. This is astonishing. Top five things going on. Huge news from Russia. Number five, Russia's casualty figures, war casualty figures have come out. And the 1.2 million casualties, that's killed, wounded, or missing, presumed dead, stands at 1.2 million. There's over 300,000 killed in action as part of these estimates. Now, this number, just so you realize, dwarfs all of its conflicts since World War II. And it's wild. Afghanistan, for example, that was a bloodbath in the 1980s for Russia, saw the Soviets losing 20,000 over 10 years. Now they lose 30,000 in 1 month. Absolutely unreal. Number four, Trump officials have met with Canadian separatists in Alberta, apparently. I mentioned the story the other day that Alberta, the province of Alberta in Canada, that is very conservative, that is the lifeblood, economically speaking, for the country of Canada, has had enough of their woke overlords and is working, is petitioning their citizens, lining up there for lines that stretch for some over a mile long to sign petitions to break away. So apparently the Trump administration connecting with those people. And number three, have you seen the video of Alex Pretti violently attacking an ICE vehicle a week or so before his death? This video has been authenticated. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but it really just kills the narrative that everybody out there has been pushing on the left of Alex Pretti being a peaceful guy. I'll also give you my lawyer's take on this. To what extent does this have evidentiary value in a potential prosecution of ICE officers in his death? So we'll get to that here today. Number two, the Federal Reserve has opted to hold rates steady. So no change, no drop in rates. It's the first time that we've held rates steady in the last several cycles. The markets predicted this, so not any giant effect, but people were watching this to see if the Fed chairman, Jerome Powell, who's locked into a fight with Trump, would blink. And apparently this, for the most part, just has been a bit of a flat thing, but just something to keep your eyes on. And number one, the Democrats are absolutely freaking out about the raid on the Fulton County, Georgia election headquarters. They are losing their minds over this. And what we know today that we didn't know yesterday is that the DNI, the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was there on site. Now, what is the top, intelligence officer of the U.S., what is she doing investigating election fraud? Well, there's only one logical conclusion, and that is that there is a suspicion that there is a foreign interference in our elections. And another thing, how coincident is it that this all happens a month after Maduro is captured? So this is, to me, this is the giant, story. And I'm going to be on Riley Lewis a little bit later today, Real America's Voice, this afternoon. I look forward to joining Riley. And I know they're going to ask me about this. I'm telling you that in order to get the warrant for a search of this kind, you have to convince the judge that there's a crime that occurred. And it's in these sensitive matters now in the wake of Mar-a-Lago and that raid, I mean, the standards are high, and it's always much harder for Trump to get these things than it is for a Democrat. So, you know, the way I see it potentially being, there's a strong likelihood here that they shared with the judge some very high level, but cursory, but enough to get the warrant information potentially that they have recovered from Madero as they've been interviewing him in jail in Manhattan. A lot of what was, you know, a conspiracy or thought of, you know, broadly as a conspiracy, you know, months and years ago, now is turning into a potentially a reality. So I'm not, look, I'm not telling you, I don't know. I'm not on the inside of this. And presumably I would hope that the Department of Justice keeps a very small circle of people in the know on this, so information does not leak out. But I'm just, as an attorney, I'm looking at this, and I don't think there is a huge, you know, it's not coincidental that you have this, this order of operations, this you know, how this has all how this has all come about. So I'm absolutely fascinated by this. And people, by the way, the Democrats that are coming out and they're screaming, how dare Trump do this? He is a sore loser. He can't, this is him just, doubling down on something that has been disproven over and over again. And I want you to think about this every time you see somebody on television or you hear somebody talking about this quote unquote unprecedented and improper investigation by the Department of Justice of Fulton County. If everything is done on the up and up, if the election was 100% clean, wouldn't they welcome a review? In other words, generally speaking, if you've got nothing to hide, why is any of this a problem? People have been asking me, how do you go about and prove that something, happened with the election, that the results were monkeyed with? And the answer is that, like financial crimes, voting data is a bunch of ones and zeros. You can run a forensic audit of an election. You're required to keep a record of those votes. And the fact is that for months now, if not for the better part of a year, the DOJ has been trying to get these records from Fulton County. And Fulton County, the people down there have refused to turn them over. Now, that's what this is about, right? And again, I'm just, there's people out there just absolutely melting down in hysterics over this. And I want to, every time I see somebody on CNN, last night watching CNN, I'm looking at it, I'm going, my goodness, if it really was a clean election, as you say, why not just turn this stuff over, right? Why not just say, here, we've got nothing to hide. Here you go. That's where I'm beginning to believe that it is much more likely than not that the election in Georgia, and particularly here in Fulton County, the way it was run in Fulton County, that it was rigged. Based on how all these people are acting. This lady that went, she did herself no favors, by the way. She's an elected official down there, I believe. Her name is, Mo Ivory. She's the commissioner. And yesterday she put together the social video and put this up on her Instagram account. Listen to what she's saying.
An update. We're at the elections hub right here off of Fairburn Road, and they did correct the warrant, and they are now in there getting the documents. 700 boxes of 2020 ballots and accompanying things that go with it. Absentee ballots, all the things, right? So our clerk of Superior Court, Shay Alexander, is in there making a log of everything that they're taking. But this,
she seems very nervous. I'm just stopping the tape here for a second. I mean, if you're not watching the Sam cam, I mean, she's holding her hands, right? She's rubbing her hands together, kind of, one of these things. That's always a tell, by the way, in body language. That's self-soothing. When you're shook up and you're trying to appear confident, you do the you certain touching of your body. Anyway, I'm pointing something out. If I was interviewing her as a law enforcement official, or if I was interviewing her as an attorney, I would be looking at these body language and thinking I'm right over the target, right? That I'm onto something. That this lady is absolutely worried, and not because people are taking away boxes. Again, if you've got all these boxes, if you got all this evidence, and it shows that the election plus or minus 10 votes, 20 votes, 100 votes was absolutely clean, what are you worried about? Right? But anyway, continuing.
But this is like all wrong. So we're trying to figure out a legal plan, and we should have one, whether that's an injunction, whether a motion to quash. I mean, whatever it is, we're trying to figure it out right now, because this is an attack on our elections, meant to keep you from trying to go to the polls in November, being too afraid to change what's going on in our nation. So instead of worrying about people dying in Minnesota, here we are at the Fulton County Elections Hub. So let me go find out what the legal plan is.
Oh, let me find out what the legal plan is. I'll tell you what the legal plan is. Get a mortgage on your house so you have enough money to pay your legal bills. That should be your plan. These people are all getting indicted. And by the way, what does that look like? I mean, and what ought to be the end goal here for the Trump Department of Justice? I have some thoughts on this when we return. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. This hour of the program brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law. Because you deserve what's right.
I'm the best.
Personal injury law has been the same for a long time.
The best.
Big egos, greed, and sleazy schemes. We've had enough. Welcome to Sam and Ash, the new standard for personal injury law, where things are done the right way, because you deserve a team that delivers real support and results. When you have both, your whole world can change. Sam and Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right.
Sam Mirejovsky here with a word about Sam and Ash Injury Law. Folks, if you get hurt, don't try handling your case on your own. You will find out two things. One, it's going to tie you up for hours, for weeks, and for months. You will be answering emails, writing letters, sending faxes, responding to text messages, and waiting on hold on the phone for more time than you can even imagine. And the second thing is, after all of that, you're going to end up upside down on your case. You're going to end up in a world of hurt financially. I shared an example yesterday that I read on X, a post by a nice liberal lady who got hit by an illegal immigrant driving around Los Angeles and wanted to just handle it nicely through insurance. And in the end, they were almost $1,700 upside down. And she lamented, saying, we were upside down because we did the right thing. Should have hired Sam and Ash Injury Law is what she should have done. I'm telling you, your number one thing that you need to do when you have something like this happen is call Sam and Ash. 800-304-2000, 800-304-2000. Sam and Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right. All right, folks. I'm looking at these potential prosecutions. I mean, look, let's look at Fulton County and see logically where this could go. Because I think a lot of you are wondering, okay, so we did a raid. We gathered the evidence. They took 700 boxes. At least this according to the commissioner down there. 700 boxes. They took absentee ballots. They took the actual physical ballots. And they're going to review it. Now, the people that are going to look at this evidence, the FBI and by the way, if Tulsi Gabbard's involved, the people in the intelligence services are going to be looking at it too. If there's a concern that there was foreign interference, they're going to go through it, and it's Again, it's an election, it's ones and zeros. It's data. And they will very quickly figure out if these ballots are legit. Let me give you an example of how this would happen. They're going to look at every single ballot to determine if it was, if the person that submitted it was a legitimate voter. I mean, that's what they're going to do. They're going to match signatures. But they're going to trace it. And that's very easy to do because you have, on one hand, you've got the ballots, and on the other hand, you've got registered voters. You can't just show up and vote. You've got to first register to vote. So it's just matching up, the A column and the B column. And what happens and I'm just throwing this out there, what happens if in the B column, which is the votes cast, and in the A column, the registered voters, what happens if there's more in the B column than the A column? Right? That would be a very big problem for Fulton County, wouldn't you think? Now, if they're able to prove this, then they're able to file, go to a grand jury and get an indictment and proceed with criminal prosecution. To me, the most important thing about the criminal prosecutions is the court of public opinion. We have to reverse people's thinking about this as being some sort of a conspiracy theory, right? You've got to convince the public that they were lied to. We're in and look, there's a portion of the country that's never going to believe anything. I mean, they think that Alex Pretti is now the patron saint of liberalism. I get it. Like you can throw whatever facts you can in front of these people. They're always going to believe in they're going to keep their faith, their ideology. But there is a middle of the country that has, and we'll call them normies, but they're people that are open to having their minds changed, that just have said, okay, you say there's a stolen election, where's the proof? And I was one of those people at one point. Show me the proof. I'm an attorney, but look at facts, show me the evidence. One thing that is going to come out of this, and I'm just thinking ahead here, and I think this is an important point. If we discover quickly, and I mean, let's say within weeks, if we discover quickly that, for example, the A column doesn't match the B column, that the registered voters don't match the votes in a way that benefited Joe Biden, what does that say about Trump's Department of Justice when he was president in 2020, at the end of 2020 and early 2021? What does it say about Bill Barr? I mean, I think I know what it says. I'm throwing this out sort of as a rhetorical question, but if right now, just by pulling the records that were available, 6 years ago, if these records were available then, and Bill Barr just said, well, there is no proof. Mr. President, there's no proof. And Barr has written a book, and he's done a tour, and he's gone on all sorts of media to say, Mr. President, I want to help you, but there's just no there. Right? How many times did we hear that? I've heard Bill Barr say that in person last time I saw him. He just says, well, I told Trump, I don't see it there. I don't know. And everybody in the room's like, oh, yeah. See, Trump doesn't listen to reason. And how many times has Trump been proven right? And the so-called smart people in the room, the adults in the room, how many times have they been proven wrong? That's a huge part of the story, too. Yeah, I saw Trump's repost about that. Maybe I'll get to that here in a moment. I have to hear when we come back talk about Pretti, because it's getting bad for them. The more facts that come out, I think about this guy, the worse it all gets, and they're just rallying around the wrong person. Once again, the left needs better martyrs. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. This hour of the program brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law. Don't do your case on your own. Get legal advice now. 800-304-2000. Sam & Ash Injury Law, California, Nevada, because you deserve what's right. Folks, this Pretti tape that was authenticated now, and I think no disagreement that it is, in fact, Alex Pretti a week or so before his death, is not helpful to the Democrats' cause. I'm just telling you, it's not. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone, Nevada's favorite recovering Californian, reporting for duty. Sam at what'srightshow.com is my email. Here's the tape. I'm going to play it here. Those of you listening, I will describe what's happening. And if you're watching the Sam Cam, you can see this for yourselves. Here we go. Okay, that guy in the brown, that is Pretti. He's wearing a black hat. He's in the brown clothes. Very similar outfit to what he had on when he was shot. He is yelling at ICE officers. There's a guy in full gear there, an ICE officer in a unmarked Ford SUV, and the camera's kind of from a distance here. All right, I'll continue the tape. A lot of expletives. He spit. He just spit at the officer.
This is a moment the news movement filmed on January 13th in Minneapolis, showing a man who appears to be Alex Pretti interacting with federal immigration agents.
Oh, there he goes. He kicks the taillight of the car.
Shot and killed him.
You heard that, right? That's him kicking the tail, and he kicks the taillight out of the car. Now, it's literally, he's damaged government property. That's what we have here. Now, just hold tight, because everybody's making the argument now. You see it. Every stupid leftist out there is saying that, I guess if you damage a car now, you deserve to be killed in America. That's just hold on to that, Robbie. I know you're despondent over this, but hold on to that point. If that's what you think, hold on. I'm gonna get to you in a moment.
Agent then got out of the vehicle, grabbed him, and pushed him to the ground. During the altercation, agents fired tear gas and pepper balls into the crowd. They continued to hold the man down before they retreat, and he walks away.
Yeah. I mean, they should have arrested him. They should have hauled him in, and they should have, charged him with a federal crime, which is destruction of federal property. I don't see, he got off light, is my point. Now, that's my response to you when you say that this is what I mean. Kicking a taillight of a car deserves the death penalty. That's not what he got for kicking the taillight of the car. They didn't even arrest him. This video actually shows the level of restraint that ICE officers used, right? This shows the level of this. They could have escalated this more. They got him to the ground. They subdued him. I presume you can kind of see they're maybe frisking him for weapons. They check him for weapons, and then they let him go. And they drive off with a busted taillight that, by the way, you and I have to pay for through our taxes. So, side note on that. Now, what happens a week or so later is a consequence of really the light touch that these ICE officers are using with these people. If Alex Pretti had been arrested, if he had been charged, if he had spent a few nights in jail, maybe his parents or whoever is in his life could have gotten through to him and said, "Listen, Alex, enough. Just calm yourself. You're going to end up destroying your life." He could have thought twice about it, but he was emboldened by the fact that they let him loose. And he came back for more. This is the tragedy of it. Remember yesterday I mentioned that really, being consequential with adults is like being consequential with your kids. And if you tell your kids don't do that and they do it, and then you just let it go, you spare the rod, you spoil the child, you end up with an unruly kid. And that's the situation, by the way, that we have here, right? Because we've got the state police and the local police refusing to enforce any laws, any basic law, like, for example, attacking law enforcement, assault of a law enforcement officer. I mean, that's not allowed. That's a felony. But they're not arresting him. They're not arresting Alex Pretti. And if local police had arrested him for this assault and for this damage of property, guess what would have happened? Maybe Alex Pretti would still be alive. So what bearing does this have on the legal case? Should there be a criminal filing, or definitely will be a civil case, I can promise you that, in Minnesota, a civil case into his death. You can't go up and claim to the jury, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Alex Pretti was a saint. Alex Pretti was the nicest, sweetest guy around. We have this thing in court called, well, why? Because you have a tape of him acting like a dick, right? Fundamentally, right? You have him kicking and spitting. I've endured now what he died on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I hear nothing but about this guy being basically a walking human teddy bear, basically in the skin of Mother Teresa. That's how they're trying to sell it. And but we have this thing in the law, in court, where if you want to present evidence in court, you have to get permission from the judge. You can't just go into court and say whatever you want as an attorney. And there are rules of evidence, and there's evidence that can be excluded by the judge. And one of the reasons why something can get excluded is if it's too inflammatory, and it's too, and it doesn't have really any bearing on the case itself. But there are times where you can bring in excluded evidence as a rebuttal against an argument the other side is making. So if the other side tries to, because you can use it as impeachment evidence, right? So the other side will say, he was peaceful, he was great. And you can say, look, I'm going to play the tape of this, but I'm going to play a tape of another incident too, where this guy is showing a pattern of behavior as a deranged lunatic. By the way, here is Elizabeth Warren. This is great, those of you watching the Sam Cam. With the background of Alex Pretti kicking and spitting, Elizabeth Warren delivering her remarks about what a sweet, kind, and peaceful man Alex Pretti was.
Caring for people was at the core of who he was. He was incapable of causing harm. Alex carried patience, compassion, and calm as a steady light within him.
He's kicking behind her. He's kicking the SUV and the taillight goes flying out.
Him. Even at the very end, that light was there.
Does she mean the taillight? Is that the light she's referring to?
I recognized his familiar stillness and signature calm composure.
I'm listening to this as a lawyer. I'm listening to Elizabeth Warren as if she were the plaintiff's attorney, or if she was the state prosecutor putting the two officers that fired shots at Pretti on trial. And I'm picturing myself as opposing counsel. And I would go, I would play the video. And the judge I think the judge would have to let it in at that point. I would play the video, and then I would read the transcript of what opposing counsel said in his or her opening statement. Right? That's literally what I would do. I'm just telling you as a trial lawyer, that's what I would do. and it would be extremely effective. So anybody that tells you this has no bearing at all on what happened on Saturday, this video from a week before has no bearing at all, doesn't know what they're talking about. And I think it's admissible as evidence in open court. I think it's good enough to be presented as evidence to the jury of a predisposition to violence if people come forward and try to say that this guy was a saint. The lawyers and the prosecutors, whoever's presenting it, want to claim that as a narrative. And so in that sense, that's a court of law. In that sense, as a political debate, if we're going to talk about Alex Pretti being a saint, if we're going to talk about him being the best person, a nurse, he helped disabled veterans, he was saving puppies, he was solving world hunger, and we're talking about all of these virtues, and that these cops, this ICE Nazis shot Alex Pretti in cold blood for no reason, then yes, this video is very relevant. It's absolutely relevant. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Be right back after this. Saint Alex Pretti added to the pantheon of liberal saints along with Michael Brown and, of course, George Floyd. A curious question here, though, about Renee Good. Have we forgotten about Renee Good? Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Producer Robbie joking during the break that Pretti, they photoshopped him, to make him look prettier. You saw that, right? They took literally his image and made him a little bit darker, made his face less gaunt. They took it through an AI filter, put it through an AI filter, and made him look, very handsome. Because I been asking a few women on this topic, his photo, his actual photo, not the best looking guy. And producer Robbie, his theory is that Renee Good just wasn't a hot enough lesbian. Well, I'm adding the lesbian part in there gratuitously, but my theory, of course, is that it was just so obvious that she ran her car into an agent that the story is more striking now, if you will. The narrative is easier to because there is some dispute legitimately in the Pretti shooting. There is a dispute about how clean of a shot it was and whatnot. And I'm not saying here, okay, I'm not certainly I'm on the side of the officers here so far from what I've seen, but look, it is interesting that Renee Good has sort of disappeared from view. So, there it is. Okay. What are people saying about this? And jeez Louise. I don't know. You know what? Sonny Hostin has a theory. Our favorite View host. She has a theory on this about why people care about Alex Pretti. It doesn't explain, though, why they don't care as much about Renee Good. Well, listen. Here's what she said. When was this? This was on yesterday on The View.
Alex Pretti's death. It's such a horrible tragedy, but for some reason, his death has shifted America's response to what is happening to Minnesota. And it reminds me, and I think Whoopi, you and I've talked about this, it reminds me of Mississippi burning during the civil rights movement, when the FBI refused to open up an office in Mississippi to investigate all of the murders of civil rights workers, right? People that were freedom riders, people that were trying to register people to vote, except when the two young white men from New York went down to Mississippi to help, and they were murdered. Yeah. And because of their murder, all of a sudden, America got very, very engaged and interested in what was happening with racial violence and police violence. And I think this sort of harkens back to that time.
I'm just writhing in my chair over here. And have you noticed, Robbie, how everything that these people do and say is based on movies? You know, why? Just talk about the history. Mention the names, but no, they go back to the movie Mississippi Burning. You know when Gene Hackman, right? Wasn't he in that? Yeah. What was it? Remember, and it always comes back to like pop culture and movies and songs and music. These people are so emotive. They're so emotionally driven that their worldview, when you sort of pay attention to what they're saying, you realize that the entirety of their opinions and worldview are driven by what Hollywood has fed them, which is why they're functionally retarded. Anyway, I just want to point, but okay. Has Pretti gotten a gold coffin yet? That is my question. Has yes. Now that the beatification of Alex Pretti is all but complete, have they given him a George Floyd gold coffin yet? Because until we have Jacob Frey kneeling and weeping before a gold coffin, then I'm sorry, Sonny Hostin, the life of this white man has not made as great of an impact as the death of St. George Floyd. I'm just bringing this up. I mean, it's true. Now, let me tell you something else about this. I know people are upset. I know I'm obsessed about it because I'm following the news, and I you're perhaps a little bit more into this because you're well informed. But there are a lot of people out there that don't even really know that this is going on. And if they do, they can't even say the name Alex Pretti. Getting ahead of myself. My mind is working faster than my mouth. They don't know Alex Pretti. They don't know the name. Renee Good, forget that. They couldn't pick her up out of a lineup. George Floyd, they know who George Floyd is. People, I think, do. And, well, the name ID matters because that is a reflection of just how well the hoax is working, right? If it becomes a household name, then presumably the messaging behind it, the lie behind it, is sticking. And it is a hoax. It is a hoax. And I'll tell you why. You know, if you look at and now we've seen it. We don't know the shooting of Alex Pretti. We don't know if he actually had a gun on him at the moment that he was shot or not. We don't know if he actually fired at officers or not. But we do know that he showed up, he interfered in the arrest of a woman. He showed up to interfere in law enforcement activity. We don't have to make a judgment on whether it was legitimate or illegitimate. There were police officers that are federal agents that were operating and conducting maneuvers, and he went and he interfered with them while carrying a gun. That's a suicidal move. And then we also know, and this is new information since yesterday, we know that in the video I played just before the break, we know that he was engaging with officers and he wasn't responding to them. He was the aggressor. He was there picking a fight. He was there attacking them. And in fact, if you listen to the tape carefully, you hear him saying, assault me, get me. He's taunting the officers. Actually, he's asking the officers to strike him. This is why, and this is why the entire now liberal myth that's being created around this is such a hoax, is such a joke, is because more information that comes out, and I told you this would happen on Monday. I said, hey, we're going to get more information. The more information we have, the more obvious a certain, path on this is going to be. And seeing that this guy was out there so aggressively engaging and attacking law enforcement. This is just one incident that was caught on tape. Tells me what I need to know. And it confirms the reports that came out CBS News on Tuesday that I shared with you, where his parents told CBS that they had tried to talk him down from Alex Pretti from engaging this way, that he could go out, he could protest, he could speak what we call classic First Amendment rights, but that he shouldn't be out there assaulting and kicking and interfering with officers, that it was dangerous. Logical people, right? His parents clearly were. And so this really comes down to, it's not politics. It's just plain human stupidity. And that the Democrats want to exploit this, and that they've deliberately put people like Pretti and Good in harm's way so that they can be harmed, attacked, and killed, right? Or so goes the narrative, right? Attacked. Teaching these people to go out and attack, putting them in harm's way and getting them killed now creates opportunity for propaganda that can be used, hence the hoax. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone, back after this. Folks, what I always try to do here on this program is to step back, to zoom out, and to try to explain why everything is happening. What's the purpose behind it? Okay? Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. As always, this hour of the program brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law. In a crash, call Sam and Ash, 800-304-2000, 800-304-2000, because you deserve what's right. Now, hear me out on this. What do you think? What do you think is the overarching plan that the Democrats have with all of this anti-ICE incitement? Because that's what it is. I mean, it's an open agitation, and you start to see some clues of this when you pay attention to what they're saying. The Democrats are notoriously well-disciplined in their messaging. Put another way, the Democrats are very good at reading from a script, which helps because most of them are brain dead. Now, the script right now that is out there is very much defund ICE, defund Border Patrol, defund basically the Department of Homeland Security. If you think I'm exaggerating, here is a Congresswoman Mirejovsky talking about this exact thing. And let's see, this was, when did she say this? This was literally just days ago. Let's see, when did she say this? This was Tuesday night at a town hall in Washington State. Here's what she said.
We really need to, as soon as we get the gavels back, we have to dismantle DHS and ICE and CBP. And we have to reconstruct them to what they really should be doing. Remember, don't let people tell you that these are agencies that have always existed and they need to exist. They didn't exist before 9/11.
Oh, yeah, by the way, if that were actually true, if we didn't have Border Patrol before 9/11, I'm going to go with the Congresswoman's, fantasy here. I don't know, maybe perhaps that moment where we let a bunch of hijackers into the country that then killed 3,000 people, maybe that was not the best moment. So, we do need borders. But beyond that, take Democrats at their word. I always say this. When people tell you what they're going to do, what they want to do, believe them. We in America have this terrible thing where we like to ignore crazy things that Democrats, liberals say, and we just think that they're just exaggerating, because we're so used as Republicans to our side lying to us and telling us things that they're going to do as principled conservatives, and they get into office and they do none of it. So, we are gaslit by our own side, by Republicans for so long, that we think that the Democrats are lying to their constituency when they say this stuff. But literally, what this nice Congresswoman is saying is cancel the borders. Cancel the border. And if you go back, if you look at what they did under Joe Biden, functionally, I mean, we had a border patrol, right? We certainly didn't dismantle the border patrol. We kept the Department of Homeland Security. We had a guy named Alejandro Mayorkas in charge of it. But functionally, did we have a border? Right? Functionally, in practice, the reality on the ground, were we keeping people out of the country? And the answer, of course, is no, we didn't. And it suited the Democrats' needs really well. Now, one of the top news stories this week, I shared this yesterday, was the census numbers, or the prediction of the census numbers, anticipated census numbers from 2030, which is only 4 years away. And this census, again, it's 2028. It's going to be such an important year for J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, whoever, to win and to preserve and continue the Make America Great Again movement, because controlling that census and cleaning up the census is going to be an electoral bloodbath for Democrats. Leftists, whether they be here in the U.S. or in Europe, globally, understand that open borders benefit them. They throw in a bunch of trash people from outside of the country, give them free stuff, give them benefits, make them grateful and dependent on them, and they become voters for life. And even if they don't vote, in our system, they provide the renumbering, the bodies, the necessary critical mass to shift the outcome of elections by stocking blue states with these people. And it goes back to a major misnomer, and perhaps even a miscalculation, if you will, by Greg Abbott and by, even DeSantis, whereas Biden administration began flooding, the border states, particularly Texas, with a bunch of illegals. What did Abbott do? He bussed these people up north. He bussed them to blue states. And he actually, in so doing, helped bolster these blue states where there are already a lot of Democrats, bolster the number of people there, never imagining that what would happen during the census is we decide to count illegal immigrants because we have a Supreme Court that has a guy named John Roberts in it who is a lib, and that all of this would become, these people would shape the outcome of elections for years to come. The enforcement of our borders, the closing of the border, and the regular expulsion of illegal immigrants from this country is an existential threat to the Democratic Party. And that is why their talking points are consistently going to sound like Jayapal. Here's Ed Markey. Ed Markey, of course, is from Massachusetts, senator there. And this is what he said.
What do you want to happen to ICE?
I don't trust this administration. I don't trust this administration with the ICE funding. So to the extent to which we need to stop and have this debate and make them accountable, let's see if the Republicans are willing to rally around a way in which we deal with this issue. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have this unfolding constitutional crisis beset every city in our nation before the end of this year, including on Election Day, when the Insurrection Act is going to be invoked by Trump, and he is going to try to make sure that minority voters especially are not allowed to come out and participate in our democracy. That's what this is all about. It is a crisis point in our nation's history.
Oh, the state of Massachusetts. Never there has been a place where people feel so incredibly superior to everybody else and yet be absolutely stupid at the same time. Ed Markey there, with his nice Boston accent. Okay. This is a bold statement for the same day that the warrant on Fulton County was served, right? Trump is going to try to make sure that minority voters, especially, are not allowed to come out and participate in our democracy. Hey, here's an idea, idiot. If we have national requirement for voter ID in national elections, if we require that, all you have to prove is that you're a citizen, right? What does race have anything to do with any of that? If you are a citizen and you can prove your citizenship, why would you care about, participating? How would that affect you at all, participating in an election? This guy is saying it out in the open. He is admitting to the fact that these minority voters are undocumented and and are at risk of being deported, are at risk of criminal prosecution for unlawful voting. And this is why they are all yelling about DHS and Homeland Security, and of course Border Patrol and ICE being defunded. And they're teeing up. If you listen to this, I think they're teeing up for a shutdown, another government shutdown, where they're going to try to pull funding. Here's Alex Pretti saying the same thing again, following the talking points.
Not a single dollar more while they're roaming the streets, coming out of unmarked cars, masks, not identifying themselves. No more funding for DHS, for ICE, for CBP, while they're detaining innocent children, while they're detaining and even assaulting Latinos for the color of our skin, or because we occasionally speak Spanish. Other language minorities have been subject to this abuse as well.
Gosh, Robbie, sometimes I walk out in public and I speak Czech, which I speak fluently. I didn't realize that I was at risk of being bundled up by Trump's Nazis and being sent out of the country. This is not happening. These people are actually just lying through their teeth, and they're because they're desperate, and Trump is dismantling everything that they have been building quietly behind the scenes since the day Obama got in office. I'd be in a full panic too. So when you zoom out and you look at all of this, that's what's going on. They are fighting for open borders to preserve their political power. And everything else is just the arguments they're making and the emotional devices that they're using to manipulate people to get what they want. Sam Mirejovsky here on the What's Right Media Network. The show brought to you, as always, by Sam and Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right.
The Sam and Ash team, they wanted me to have the best care. They had my interests at heart. I have an enormous amount of gratitude. I cannot say enough thank you.
You're minding your own business, you're sitting in traffic, you're at a red light, 10 and 2 on the wheel, when out of nowhere, some person driving like a maniac, maybe illegal, maybe uninsured even, slams into you. Now your car's a mess, maybe you're a little bit hurt, you need help, and you need help right now. You turn to your insurance company, you go to them, palms up, you say, please help me. You turn over everything, you deal with them, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, all that work, all those hours and hours spent turning everything over to them, they offer you basically pennies on the dollar for what your car is worth, and ignore your injury and any other damages that you have. And this is frustrating, and it happens to Americans day in and day out. It happens here in Nevada, it happens in California, it happens in Texas, it happens across the country. Don't become a victim twice just because you're nice. Call Sam and Ash Injury Law today. One quick phone call, you get the help you need. No money up front, right? No money up front. Doesn't cost you anything. And what you get in return is proper compensation. And at the end of the day, you'll be in a better financial place without any of the hassle. You've got your job, you got your family, you got kids, you have things you need to take care of. Go live your life. Focus on getting better, focus on healing, and let the professionals at Sam and Ash handle the rest. Sam and Ash Injury Law, samandashlaw.com. That's the website, 800-304-2000, 1-800-304-2000. Sam and Ash, because you deserve what's right. Folks, let me tell you something here. By the way, Sam Mirejovsky here. The What's Right show is on like Donkey Kong. I'm fired up. It's obvious what the senators and congressmen and Democrats are all trying to do. They want to run on the ICE thing. They want to. They're talking about it openly for the midterms. I think they also may force another government shutdown to seek the defunding of ICE. I think thanks to the big, beautiful bill, it's going to be tricky for them to really interrupt much of the operations because the operations have been funded now already. The money's been appropriated. This is another beautiful move, and this is why I ultimately, even though I am a deficit spending hawk, came out in support of the big, beautiful bill, and I was so opposed to Musk's craziness in that moment of time. So the good news is that Trump's agenda really can't be impacted here, but they're running on this. They want to shut down ICE. They want open borders. They want the country filled with illegals as quickly as possible, as much as possible, so that they maintain their political power. Here's Chris Murphy, congressman from, senator, from Kentucky, Connecticut. Oh my gosh, my mind's. Here's Congressman Chris. Here's Senator Chris Murphy, a Democrat, Connecticut. Here's what he says.
You know, we understand that we don't run the Senate, nor the House, nor the White House. If we really want to strip down ICE and rebuild it, make the Department of Homeland Security operate legally every single day, we've got to win elections. But in the interim, we certainly can use the power we have as Democrats, whose votes are necessary in order to pass the budget, to demand these common sense reforms.
Well, elect more Democrats, get more open borders. Giddy up, let's go. That's what they're talking about. Now, after the break, I'm going to get into the fraud because, you know, this to me, that's an enormous component of this. And all of this obstruction to ICE, at least in Minnesota, began, coincided with the fraud revelations. First 1 billion, then 2 billion, then 5 billion, then 8 billion, then 11 billion. And they just keep, every time we blink, it's another couple of billion there as a running total of fleecing happening in that state, all while Democrats just sort of were there and not paying attention to any of this. Very interesting. But we'll get to that in a moment because that's a standalone issue. I still think that a majority of Americans at the end of the day think that having a border is important. We understand the concept of borders. We see and are ill at ease with countries around the world, Western countries, where we look and we see how their countries have been overrun by people who don't belong there and who don't assimilate and who are bringing their inferior cultures, their nasty ways of life into those countries. And we think of this much as we would invited persons into our home. We have a sense of propriety for our property and for, most people have fences between themselves and their neighbors. So we get this idea. We fundamentally understand it. And this may be a driving issue in the midterms, although I suspect the economy still actually is going to be the most important operative issue. Now, on the subject of what's actually going on today, this morning there was a great press conference in Minnesota. Now, Tom Homan, I've described this to you before. The pivotal thing here is bringing back Tom Homan and sort of sidelighting Kristi Noem, who by the way, in today's cabinet meeting was dead silent. I think Kristi Noem is hanging by a thread in this administration. And but if I have time, I'll get to all that. But it's not as important as what Tom Homan said in this press conference. This was unbelievably good. And here's the Homan presser. Okay, he's explaining why there's so many agents in Minneapolis. And this is just textbook. This is so important. Listen to every word.
One agent can arrest one bad guy in the safety and security of a jail where he's behind the wire. We know we don't have weapons. But when you normally release that public safety threat, illegal alien back in the community, we have a job to do. We're going to arrest him. So we're going to find him. And what happens is now we got to arrest somebody on his turf. We have access to who knows what weapons. Now we got to send the whole team out. Cover the back door, cover the front door, officer safety reasons. Then because of the hateful rhetoric and the attacks on ICE officers, now we got to send a security team behind the arrest team. So what could have been done with one person in a safety and security jail, now we got 15, 16 people out there doing it. I know that causes stress in the community.
This is absolutely perfectly put. Now, I'm going to play more of this when we come back. It's just that important because Homan gets into the narrative, right? And he resets the narrative really well. So when we come back, I want to talk about the rest of this press conference, hugely important. Also, how this ties into the fraud. And you'll notice, Tim Walz is going on a little bit of a PR blitz right now, trying to kind of put the cat in the bag. And the cat is, to extend the metaphor, the cat is doing anything but wanting to get back in the bag. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Great to have you with us as always. More of the What's Right show up next. I think Trump gets it done with sober professionals. That's my opinion. I've always said this. And when Trump began putting his cabinet together, loading it full of really qualified high-end people like Marco Rubio, even J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth, these are serious individuals. And look, so Kristi Noem, I'm not going to get back into this. Tom Homan is one of those individuals. Tom Homan has a confident sobriety about him that will get the job done. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Friends, welcome to the What's Right show. Here's what Homan said this morning in the press conference, resetting the narrative. A very important statement here.
Let's not forget, for 4 years, we were told the border's secure. 4 years, we were told the border's secure. And we all knew it wasn't. And I want this to be a positive thing we're doing here today. I also want to remember the politicians are continually attacking us. Where were they the last 4 years when the number of women and children sex trafficking went all-time high? Where were they when 250,000 Americans died from fentanyl coming across the border? Where were they when women and children are dying making that journey? Where were they where over 4,000 aliens making that journey died? Historic record. Where were they? Not a word. Now we're just trying to respond to what happened the last 4 years and keeping this country safe.
Where were they? And you can say this too to people that that you may strike up a conversation with, and they start screaming about Nazis, this and that, and say, "Hey, let's back up for a minute. Let's go back to the Biden era. If that was when we weren't being bad people, right? It's a reframe. Let's go back to the Biden era and tell me how that was better. Because we had hundreds of thousands of people dying crossing the border. Even if you're a pro-immigration and compassionate person, how is any of that compassionate? Where are the 300,000 missing kids? Well, it wasn't 300,000. Okay, 20,000? How far down are you willing to adjust that number before you recognize that it's still a lot? it's still completely unacceptable. And that the suffering endured by these kids, perhaps some of it still ongoing, is just unimaginable. Every life is a tragedy. And by the way, we recognize that as conservatives, and this is what bothers me a little bit about well, I understand that we're pissed off about this lying. But, you know, it's okay to say that the death of Alex Pretti and Renee Good is tragic, that their deaths are tragic. And, you know, Trump said something like this the other day, and I don't have it here. We didn't get this, did we, Robbie? But Trump gets out there and says, you know, if you don't think that these deaths are tragic, then there's something really wrong with you. He said that. So this isn't just me. We conservatives care about life. We do. And everything that I advocate for here on this program is in furtherance of preserving life, protecting life, and advocating for the lives of individuals here in this country. To that end, we can't be overrun by illegal immigrants, particularly dangerous felons, and preserve a quality of life for Americans here in this country. Can't do it. We cannot be so compassionate that we end up sacrificing our own people, our women, our children, our youth, and even grown men. We can't be so compassionate that we let our own American-born criminals out of jail because, you know, we believe in their redemption, in spite of evidence, massive evidence to the contrary. We can accept that propaganda and liberal narratives wound up people like Pretti and like Good, and that got them so messed up in the head that they went out and did stupid stuff and put themselves in harm's way. Good driving her car into an agent, Pretti showing up, picking a fight with agents while armed with a handgun. These are things we can recognize. And we can express our compassion for these individuals because that's who we are. We care about life. It's the other side that doesn't give a rat's rear end, and this is why Tom Homan is so right. Everybody out there screaming about ICE being a bunch of Nazis, where were they when people were dying every day, making the trek here so Democrats could have their voter rolls boosted? Where were they when children were getting sex trafficked? Where were they when American families, rich and poor, had their kids die from fentanyl? They're nowhere to be found. This is a part of it all that breaks my heart. And this is why I love that Tom Homan is resetting this. So Homan went on in this press conference, and he says, look, it's a priority here is to remove these bad people from the street. It's all pretty straightforward, isn't it?
All operations will be targeted, but the prioritization are going to be criminal aliens, public safety threats, and national security threats. I've met with Marcos and his staff. We got to allow them. We got to allow them to keep us busy. So that would be our focus.
But that is enough that's what, there is not going to be a focus on people who have no other crimes except for their status.
If you're in the country illegally, you're never off the table. But privatization doesn't mean you forget about everybody. So let me say this. If the message we send is you can enter this country illegally, it's a crime, don't worry about it. You can have your due process, show up in court, not show up in court, get ordered removed, don't worry about it. Unless you commit a serious crime, you're good to go. If that's the message we send to the world, you're never going to fix this problem. The most vulnerable people in the world will make that dangerous journey like they did under the Joe Biden administration. Over 4,000 aliens died making that journey. And again, a significant increase in sex trafficking. Because when they did that and opened those borders up saying, we're not going to detain you, we're going to give you free health care, we're going to fly you to the city of your choice, put you in a free hotel room, give you 3 meals a day, and give you work authorization, we're just going to bring you in. And when they did that, they sent a message to the whole world, you can come and do this.
Yeah, this is absolutely true. And remember, too, there's just so many people here who are national security threats. And again, the Democrats out there protesting ICE, and they're perfectly fine with potential terrorists remaining in the country. Every time a guy like Alex Pretti gets out there and slows these officers down from doing their work, gives another extra day or two to a potential terrorist to remain in the country. When that terror attack comes, it's going to be Trump voters and Biden voters and Kamala voters alike that all end up getting murdered. We're all in this together. You think that the terrorists, the Islamic terrorists that attack in Europe go, oh, wait, this was a compassionate liberal that left us in the country. We're going to spare this one. Something fundamentally in the liberal brain is broken. Like, I'm over here fighting for your life, for your safety, for your kids, for your way of life. And these people are just self-sabotaging themselves and the rest of us, with them. That's the story here. How does this connect to the fraud? Because this is a huge component of the resistance to ICE, the resistance to this to immigration, and it's a huge part of the story. I got to get to this before we run out of time. So a quick break here, and I'll get you everything you need to know about this when we come back. Rarely wrong, always right. Sam Mirejovsky here on the What's Right Media Network. Now, the fraud in Minnesota, you notice Tim Walz has been doing some PR lately, has been trying to get the word out that this is, nothing to see here, folks. It's all, it's all basically nothing. And so he did this sit down. He did an interview. He's been doing a bunch of them. Where he's trying. You got to hand it to him. The guy is trying to make this better. Here's what he said just a day ago.
You mentioned this fraud investigation and the reason that they're here. Is there anything you think, when you look back, you could have done differently to prevent them from showing up and doing what they're doing here?
No, they were coming anyway. It was all make-believe that we'd been at it. Every state had this. And look, I do think there has to be accountability in this. No one in state government was implicated. This happens all over. People did this. We got it caught. We put them in jail or whatever.
Okay. All right. Do we want to acknowledge here, or do we want to talk about it somewhere else, that the governor's office and Keith Ellison himself, who is the Attorney General of Minnesota and a high-ranking Democrat, national high-ranking Democrat, held meetings with the people that have been implicated in this fraud, and in those meetings discussed specifically how they could help these entities avoid scrutiny, that it was a representative of one of these convicted fraudulent enterprises that was saying, we just got this problem with oversight, we got this problem with law enforcement, we got this problem. And I played the tape for you here, and you heard Keith Ellison, who was, you got the governor, and you've got the, you've got the lieutenant governor, and you've got the attorney general of the state. I mean, it's a constitutional officer of the state of Minnesota. And the top cop of Minnesota, literally promising to do his part to keep these people out of trouble. Like, you can gloss this over with words, but there's stuff here. And then you take Ilhan Omar, for example. I'm glad I saw this on Newsmax. Love Newsmax. Great people there. I saw this this interview here. Carl Higbee at Newsmax talking to GOP strategist John Jordan about Ilhan Omar's winery. This was a great segment because all of this is 100% true, and it's exactly the kind of questions that people ought to be asking.
Another major asset she listed in her financial disclosure is this winery. That was in 2023. That was worth, according to Ilhan Omar's own financial disclosure form, between $15,000 and $50,000. But on her financial affidavit from a year later, that same winery was listed at a value of between $1 and $5 million. It gets weirder. Up until yesterday, Benny Johnson was able to find their supposed inventory bottles and all the things they had, their office location, and a bunch of other information on the business. But as of today, those sites are totally shut down, and any mention of their website has been wiped off the internet. I'm talking gone. The Wayback Machine, all these other crafty little archive sites, everything is gone. Like, deleted the root service. I called my computer buddy, Jim. He couldn't even find it. It was some fancy AR jargon bot machine for recovery. I don't even know, he was explaining it to me. He couldn't even find it, which is weird that a company that boasted an award-winning wine, the, quote, double gold winner in 2022 San Fran Chronicle competition, with a corporate value of up to $5 million, would just vanish into thin air?
Now you're probably thinking, well, what does this have to do with state fraud, right? What does this have to do with, you know, with Medicare funds and whatever? You know, I have some theories on this, right? It sounds to me like Ilhan Omar and her husband created a fictitious entity that wasn't real and gave it all this, you know, these accolades and everything, and then used that entity to get money, to get money. And where did that money come from? Who invested in it? Because a very real possibility is that it was a government funds that invested in this, right? And now part of the fraud is, and that's just because that's the story here, right? I shared the clip earlier this week of Dr. Oz on the ground in Minneapolis, going to this, you know, former factory building that has been converted in all these tiny little offices, and every one of those little offices each of them does about $1 million in annual Medicare billing. And it's like they've created this little fraud farm where it's just enough billing to stay off the radar. Because if it was one business that did, you know, $400 million in billing, they'd be on everybody's radar. But instead, they put 400 small little businesses all collecting a little bit of money, and they're all siphoning stuff off. And what I suspect is going to happen, and this is a suspicion, right? I'm making an allegation. I don't know this to be true. I'm just telling you again, I'm putting on my lawyer hat here. You can't have a bunch of little, you know, fraud operations running in a state giving money directly, except through a max contribution to Ilhan Omar directly. You can't do that. You can't do that. That's tough to do. Like actually like writing her a check. And that's why she goes, oh, I've never accepted money directly. I haven't touched a bribe. But what you do if you're a clever politician like Miss Ilhan Omar is you go, all right, I'm going to set up this completely fictitious entity, but it's going to look real if anybody pokes around it. Oh, wine. Okay. All right. You know, she's Somali, so she must know something about being a sommelier. But it makes perfect sense. Okay. You like that? You like that? Okay. I thought you might. Somali, same thing. She's got a winery. And guess what? These fraud companies that she's helping, these entrepreneurs invest in her business. They don't need to see any, you know, business records or actual real money. No, they invest in her business because it's a way to funnel money directly to her. And it never touches her name. It never ends up in her bank account, but it goes to this business, and this business then goes on to buy luxury vacations for the husband. And so he and the wife, Ilhan Omar, go on a luxury trip somewhere. Or maybe it gives money to a down payment for a condo somewhere, right? You understand how this works. And I'm not saying, to be clear, that is what happened here. I'm just saying that is how you would go about doing this. And that's what this is about. Okay? So John Jordan, the strategist, goes on to explain why this whole winery seems like it never existed.
Is it possible for this to be a functioning business and have absolutely no footprint, wiped from the internet, go from 1,000 net worth to 5 million in less than a year?
Well, no other winery on earth's done that, Carl. Anybody knows anything about this knows that the wine industry is under enormous pressure. Wineries, there's people pulling up vineyards and closing wineries, including some very well-known ones. People are drinking less wine. The economy is weighed on that in favor of cheaper alcohol options. So the wine industry has been in mad contraction for quite some time now. But more to the point, you have to have a federal license to have an alcohol facility. Where is her winery on the TTB website? That's the federal regulatory body that does this. So no, this doesn't exist, and it's a phantasm that the idea you can have a winery increase in value. Everybody else in the wine business knows better.
And why did they do it? They probably saw, Tears of God or some show about wine. They're like, you know what? There's so many wineries. People get lost in this. We'll just create this front company. And that's where all these guys, they can each go in and invest $1 million and funnel money to us, and nobody will ever ask. And if they do, they just invested. They were just investors. No big deal. Again, I'm just making this allegation. I'm not saying it's true. We'll wait to see. But Robbie bookmarked this. We'll see how this all shakes out. And this is one of the things I was trying to do here is not just zoom out, but to look around the corner. Right, what's coming next? Because it's very easy, and I get your emails. I know every day I get 5 or 6 emails. I love them. I enjoy them, about Ilhan Omar and how scandalously corrupt she is. And people they talk about her corruption, but nobody explains how the mechanics of it and how it's being done. I'm telling you, this is why it helps being a lawyer, because I'm not saying because I investigate stuff, and I've had cases that are, that involve these types of shenanigans, I understand how one would go about doing something like this. So there we have it. Now you know perhaps something that other people don't, and eventually we'll let them catch up. All right, folks, Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Be back tomorrow. We're almost there. Friday just around the corner. I'll see you then.